Good Saturday morning of the fifth week, and next week is the beginning of Holy Week. So they'll text and read it. They all speak for themselves, but especially Holy Week. They've been crafted over 1,000 years. The church has reflected very deeply over the great mystery of the incarnation, but of all, especially Holy Week. It's the time of redemption. She's had a long time, and she has lived a life, both of the glorious Christ and also the crucified Christ. Everything stems from, I got to remember, everything stems from not only who Christ is, but what he did on Good Friday. That's the kicker. In a sense, you start with Good Friday and you read the rest. John doesn't even have a doesn't even have a birth account. The Synoptic Gospels have the Christmas account, as it were. Not John. He's right off to the races. Yeah. For John, the focus is Good Friday. Who and what the Son of Man lifted up. And all things flow to him, and all things flow from him. Remember the blood that comes forth from his side on the cross. The soldier believes in Christ as he kills him. And then the soldier is a symbol of the Roman world. He's a symbol of the whole world. It all comes to Christ on the cross and flows from Christ on the cross. See? That's the bottom line. As we are approaching Lent, and you see, our lives derive its meaning from the crucified Christ. What St. Paul says, we fill up those things, wanting in the suffering of Christ. I don't know of any other meaning life can possibly have. Even when you have a very pleasant life, I've had an easy life. Good grief, when I see compared to others, what a very, very pleasant and easy life, very successful life for a guy with such mediocre talents. I've had a marvelous life. God, I remember one of the old monks said, life owes me nothing. And I would say the same. If I ever complain about the life I've lived and been given, I'm going to tell you something. May my tongue cleave to my mouth, honest to God. I've had a marvelous life, and yet I take great solace and hope and trust in the passion and death of Christ. Because no matter what, death destroys the good and the bad. If that's all there is, she wrote no more. No matter how good a life you've lived or how poorly, if that's all there is, she wrote no more. Death. What's the difference? So you live on in a couple of generations, so what? You're completely forgotten. I always think about that when I walk through a cemetery. Does anybody even remember, let alone care? Does anybody care? Right? Sometimes I feel badly that so many of my friends have never been buried. They gave their bodies to science, okay, which is noble. I'm not taking anything away, but I'm selfish about this because I wish I could visit their gravesite, and I have no idea where their ashes are, their remains. My tradition, my family's tradition, and the monasteries. You're buried near your home, in the cemeteries in your home, near your home. And I know when I'm home in Connecticut, I always jump in the car and go to the summit, St. Raphael's, I think it's called. Whatever it is, I can't remember. I know how to get there, obviously, and I know where my family's buried. It's my father, mother, my grandparents, my Uncle Joe. And I stand there, and I pray for them, but I pray to them as well. I have a keen sense of the gratitude of life that they have given me because they loved me. See, and I visit them, and then I go home. I don't know how the right word. I mourn at the moment in gratitude to them and for them, and then I move forward in my life. I turn around and walk away, do exactly what they would want me to do, live my life honorably. See? And, I hope when I die that I'll be buried in our monastery in Hartford, because that's where I came from, That's where my vocation came from, the monastery in Hartford, and it's Connecticut. I think of the soil. It's the same soil as in New Haven, see? But if it's not, if the Hartford is no longer in existence, if we sell the place or get rid, I don't know what's going to happen. There's only 4 men there now. We used to have 100. Then I want to be buried with my family. I want to be buried with my mother and father, Uncle Joe, who was so good to me. See, I want to be in their company. And hopefully my niece's children and grandchildren will come once in a while and remember. The beauty of a headstone is it recalls a memory. It brings a memory to the fore, at least for one generation, maybe two. But it's still a place. It's a very sacred place. And our monasteries, the cemeteries are very sacred. I always go and visit the gravesides, the men who have affected my life, who changed my life, who invited me into the order, who taught me, who nurtured me, who lived with me, even some of the guys that were hellraisers. See? When my friend Sarah, I was in New York 2 years ago for the chapter or something like that, and Sarah, for other reasons, Sarah was still in New York, living in New York, my Sarah. But I don't know, that doesn't sound right. It must have been 4 years ago, because she came to visit me at the monastery. And I took her to dinner. We ate dinner at the monastery, at the retreat house. And I took her to the backyard, and I said, I'll show you something, sweetie. And I told her, and I went to the cemetery in the backyard, and the men there, and I pointed them out. See this guy here? See that guy there? I remember with affection and gratitude. You see? I'm sorry, people, I'm glad they give their bodies to science. But I wish there was some place in which what remains of them are buried. Not in a mass grave, but where somebody could come and stand there and say, I remember, and I love you. I mean, it's personal. It's personal. The church fosters. Only recently did you go into this donating your body and stuff, and recently. We put great stock in baptism and in funerals. The giving of new life in baptism, living it sacramentally, bearing it sacramentally, it means a lot. I guess I have deep inside of me the desire not to be forgotten. And I think for most of people who are married live on in their children and their grandchildren to a degree, but I think there is still a yearning that they be present in some manner or other in a permanent way. Not everybody. My friend Junie didn't have that thought at all in her. At all. It wasn't within her culture, but it's steeped within mine. It's like I could never not go to the cemetery when I'm home. And I could never not walk out into the backyard of our monasteries and not visit the dead. And remember, with affection and love. I remember pointing, see that guy, Sarah, that guy there? He was so much fun to live with. He was a wild man, Sarah. Somebody else, you see that guy? He has so affected my life. He believed in me, Sarah. He led me to self-belief. He helped me to believe in myself. See? That's the beauty of the graveside. It's a permanent place, even though, yes, it's permanent in the sense it's relatively permanent, but it's a place where you could go and remember. I think it's a sacred place. Cemeteries are sacred. They're holy places, not only because they have the dead, but because they help the living to remember the dead and to thank them for the lives they shared with us. And I think with whom we will one day be together again. I love that line in Italian when you say goodbye to an Italian in Italy, ci vediamo in paradiso, when they don't think they'll see you again. We will see each other again in paradise. What a wonderful thought. And I have to say, when I'm in my father's village, I always go to the cemetery. I see my grandfather's grave, grandmother's, my uncles, Sergio and Arjane. Yeah. Alessandro. Those are my uncles and aunts. I'm grateful for their lives. Their story is my story. Ci vediamo in paradiso.